actual manuscript in the Vatican. It's document 3195. If anyone is ever interested in visiting the Vatican, you can see the original manuscript of this. Hello everyone, welcome to the Linguist Library. Today I have a ton of books that I want to talk about, a ton of classics that you may not have heard of. Very exciting. I want to start with one that's very special because we get our name from this. By we, I mean people who speak Portuguese. So I'm talking about Os Lusiads, written by Luís de Camões, the Lusiads in English. Lusitania was a Roman province in the Iberia Peninsula, and the first time that name was used. So after the Romans called it Lusitania for a long time, the name wasn't used until Luís de Camões decided to write this epic poem dedicated to King Sebastian. So in this poem, we follow Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama is my soccer team in Brazil, and my cousins will love to know that I have this book in my possession nowadays. So this is the first primary major literary work of the Portuguese language. It was written in 1572. Luís de Camões left Portugal on a ship with the son of Pedro Álvares de Cabral, Fernão de Cabral, and he was on his way to India. So this is all about their trips. It starts on a naval ship in Media Res. So this is a very special poem for several reasons. So not only is it so important linguistically, but it talks about the foundation of the Portuguese spirit. It very much, the Aeneid was for Rome. In fact, it cites its sources, and it starts with an homage to the Aeneid. It starts, the first line goes, "Arms are my theme, and those matchless heroes." A metric poem, so kind of like the epic poems from the Romans and the Greeks. It follows that drum, the war drum, dum 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 dum, kind of like you're marching for war. We start in Portugal and we go all throughout the coast of Africa, all the way to India. Camões himself wrote the bulk of this in China, in Macau, and this has a lot of his personal experiences with that exotic world that was thus far unknown to the Portuguese. So this is very special for several reasons. So it's kind of like Marco Polo in the way that it talks about all the adventures. It thinks of itself as bigger than the Aeneid because of the distance that the Trojans covered to get to Rome. So it's much greater distance from Portugal to all of its other destinations. But it also mixes Christianity and mythology. So it's very much like the Divine Comedy that way. I just finished reading the Divine Comedy this last month, and I couldn't help but notice the similarities. Of course, the Divine Comedy is different in so many ways because it is not based in reality. So we're taking trips kind of inside the human psyche, and we go to hell and purgatory and heaven, which are not physical places like Africa that you can, or Asia that you can go to. But it very much talks about going from the mythological world to the Christian world and the light of Christianity and how it comes about. The poetic tragedy of this book is that it is supposed to invoke this national pride and this national ethos of a nation. But unfortunately, the same year that Luís de Camões died, Portugal kind of became a part of Spain, which was very much what he feared in his lifetime, I suppose. Don Quixote de la Mancha by Miguel de Cervantes, the first novel, and it set a precedence of what they should be like. Faulkner allegedly read this once a year, like one should read the Bible. And if you don't know what it is about, it follows a knight, or a man who thinks he's a knight, and his best friend who fight windmills. I love this edition. There's a little picture here in the bottom. I don't know if you can tell. There's a man on a horse with some spears and some swords, thinking that he's a knight. But yes, this is a very important reread for me. I love to read this, and it's one of my absolute must-haves for my home library. The next book that I want to show you is an Italian classic, probably my favorite Italian classic of all time. And okay, maybe it's up there with the Divine Comedy. They drank from the same waters anyway. So Francesco Petrarca, Canzoniere. So these are actually poems, selection of poems, and he's the first one to kind of, not the first one, but he's it's not an epic poem per se. These are romantic poems. He is very different from Dante in his way of portraying love. So Dante has this almost agape love for Beatrice, very pure, very childlike love for this woman who is perfect in almost every way. So much so that she lives in heaven, literal heaven, next to the Virgin Mary. Did I even know poetry before reading this? I had read fragments of this in the past, just because of the linguistic importance of this. If you haven't read my video on how the Italian language was created by poets, namely Dante and Petrarca, please watch it. I'm going to put it somewhere here. This is the most beautiful portrayal of human love in all of its forms and imperfections, which frankly is what makes it so unforgettable. It has a 14-line structure. It talks about mortality, it talks about time and perception of time. A little interesting fact about this is that this is the Vatican has a manuscript. In Italian, it's called an autograph, a manuscript from Petrarca's handwriting, so an actual manuscript in the Vatican. It's document 3195. If anyone is ever interested in visiting the Vatican, you can see the original manuscript of this. Francesco Petrarca is considered the father of humanism, and he inspired not just the movement, the humanistic movement, but also a legion of poets. And this is one of those literary works that feels so green. It's evergreen. It feels like it was written yesterday. It's so emotional. It is so beautiful. It is engaging. It is the best thing I've read in my entire life. Read this and no poetry before. I need a new word because he's not a poet. He's much more than that. But yeah, if you take one book from this list, and even if you don't read poetry, try to give this a go, just because we'll take my word for it. But let's move on. The other book that I want to talk about that I'm so excited that I finally have a copy of is Beowulf. Beowulf is, I have a dual language edition with Old English and Modern English. I'm going to try to get a closer shot to this later, but I don't know if you can tell here. So this is this is the first Magian poem in the English literature. Beowulf tells the story of the legendary hero Beowulf. I used to have a crush on him with the whole battle scars and whatnot. But yes, very famous tale, completely worth your time, because so much happens that it's very engaging, just the story itself. Even if you don't buy it, if you're not interested in the linguistics like I am, you can get a different version of it. It's much shorter. This is a bit bigger because of the dual language thing. But yes, great book. I'm so happy to have it. Another book I want to talk about is a short story collection by Jorge. And there's a great channel on YouTube called Better Than Food that is actually named after a review of this short story collection. So Better Than Food is basically the best way to describe this. My favorite story is probably the traitor and the hero, but all of them are extremely thought-provoking and fantastical and magical, and they just are one of those read before you die sort of books. So it's called Ficciones, so fiction, short story collection by Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges. Absolute must-have in my home library, at least. The next is basically the entire oeuvre of Machado de Assis. So Machado de Assis is the father of Brazilian literature, and I think the most popular one of his novels, the other ones aren't so much novels as they are short stories, is the posthumous memoirs of Cubas. The Penguin edition of this, I have this in Old Portuguese because I'm a linguist and I want to analyze the language, but the story is amazing. So the story of how and why this was written is also amazing. So this was written shortly after Europe kind of fell into the vogue of writing memoirs. So not only is it one of the first novels to be published in Brazil and Brazilian Portuguese, it also has a very rebellious streak to it. So this is a piece of satire. It's written from the point of view of somebody who is dead, but not an author, just a normal person who decided to write a book after he was already dead. And he dedicates it to the first worm that bites his cadaver. So it's hilarious. It's one of those books that you might actually laugh out loud. But it was written in response to the whole European movement of memoir. So you had all of these, let's take Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, for example, old David Copperfield, that were very European in its style, despite differentiating so much. This one is closer to Jane Eyre because it is told in first person, and he addresses the reader, so he breaks the fourth wall. That's one of the reasons why this was so groundbreaking. It broke the fourth wall, just like Jane Eyre, written by Charlotte Bronte. And it's supposed to be a satire. So he kind of reminds me, he's very witty in the same way that Oscar Wilde is very witty. For example, How to Be Earnest comes to mind. But yes, the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas by Machado de Assis is one of my favorite books that I reread just about every 5 years so that I don't forget it. But there are so many other books that have been translated that I also recommend. This is a short story about a doctor in an asylum, one of those antiquated loony bins, but a mental institution of the 1800s. And he really explores a lot in here, a lot of psychological themes. This is another one that's available by Penguin. My copy is an educational one because, again, I am studying his Portuguese. But Dom Casmurro is one that we study in school in Brazil. It's closer to Brás Cubas in style and in satire. He talks to the reader, he addresses the reader just like he does in Brás Cubas, and it has that witty tone, very dry humor, witty tone. The next book I want to talk about is by my all-time favorite writer that lives in my head. I think about her at least once a day. This is a new collection that I'm so happy I can recommend to you because it has finally been translated into a decent translation. I'm talking about Clarice Lispector's. This is her complete collection of stories. So there are about 10 of these that I haven't read. The majority of them I have throughout my life. I read them in Portuguese, and I'm reading them now in English, and the translation holds. So I'm very, very happy about that. If you don't know about Clarice Lispector, she is a seminal figure in Brazilian literature for many reasons. One of them is because of her writing style. So she writes in the stream of consciousness style, and she has a masterful use of repetition. Her books use a lot of motifs, but not so much. Her books have a fantastical mixture of repetition and imagery and symbolism. So she gives you something to think about and mull over. She changes your perspective. She might change your brain chemistry a little bit. She certainly did to me. Her novels are amazing. I love all of them. My favorites are Hour of the Star, The Apple in the Dark, Love, and Near the Wild Heart. I'm trying to think of these titles in English. Agua Viva, certainly up there. But I've read everything she's written, including her children's book and her short collections. Not all of them are available in Portuguese, but this one is outstanding, and I thoroughly recommend it. The next book that I bought from my home library was one that I talked about in a video that I did a couple weeks ago, a tag video that you should definitely check out. Tag videos that are on my TBR. I've just started it, so I've already started on my TBR. This is the Aeneid by Virgil. But I want to talk about this because something magical happened when I was buying this book. I ran into another great book, which is great. So this book showed up on my feed. Lavinia by Ursula K. Le Guin. I love Ursula. If you don't know Ursula, she's probably most known for her fantasy work. She's the predecessor of J.K. Rowling's Hero Journey book. I definitely love the Earthsea series. Absolutely love her. And I didn't know that she wrote a book about Roman mythology. So Lavinia is Virgil's wife, and this book is set in Italy. So this is Lavinia, who doesn't really get much of she really doesn't get a say. There's really no line of dialogue in the original poem, in the original Roman poem that talks about the foundation of Rome. So we're talking about Trojan heroes that were helped by the gods to get to the Italian peninsula and help with the foundation of Rome. Virgil's Aeneid follows Aeneas, who marries Lavinia. Love Roman mythology, love Ursula. When I saw that she'd written a book about Roman mythology, it was a no-brainer. I had to have it. I started it a couple weeks ago, and a couple days ago, and I am flying through it. There's a very poignant scene in the beginning that she's catching salt. So there's a lot of tidbits about this that is based in Rome and the Roman village that existed at the time. So there's a bit of the Etruscans. I'm just loving this, and I really, really, really love that I can recommend it to you guys. So, continuing with the theme of mythology, I found this, and I absolutely had to have it. The Palace of Illusions by Chitra. Banerjee. Yeah, this is going to be difficult. Divakaruni. So I love to read about mythology, and I think that so this is based on the fascinating tales of the Mahabharata, and it is set at the end of the Hindu script terms Dvapar Yuga, or the Third Age of Men, which many scholars dated back to 6000 BCE. or maybe 5000 BC, a time when the lives of men and gods still intersected. The epic tale weaves myth, history, religion, science, philosophy, superstition, and statecraft into its innumerable stories within stories to create a rich and teeming world filled with psychological complexity. I love mythology, and when I heard that there was a female mythological figure within the Hindu world that was being portrayed by Chitra, who I heard great things about, I just had to have it. So I haven't read this yet. I don't know anything about Hindu mythology. This is going to be my introduction to it, and I'm very excited about it. All right, well, thank you so much for staying with me till the end. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Check out the community tab, and let me know if you want an in-depth video about any of these authors or these books in particular. Should I make a top 5 Brazilian classics? Should I talk about Italian classics? Tell me what you want. I'm looking for some video ideas. Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for staying until the end. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye.